We had a wonderful event on April 26th. All of the videos are on YouTube, which is just wonderful, and they're indexed on the OHDSI website. We really spent the day celebrating our open source ecosystem. I had the pleasure of organizing this along with Adam Black, Katy, Sadowski, and Dan Smith. And we really wanted to give an update on the community, talk about ways to get involved, and try to highlight some new projects that we have going on with our community as the ecosystem continues to evolve. So one of the things that I love about OHDSI and open source is that it's about sharing of ideas, and open science and open source go hand in hand. And so really, if you look at all the complex ideas that we have, it really is built on the foundation of our data model, which is built to answer 3 questions around data characterization, patient level prediction, and population level estimation. And on top of that, we've been able to build artifacts and complexity that allows us to create evidence and discover new subsets of populations that respond differently to treatments and may have different diseases. And so this is really at the heart of biomedical discovery. And for us to be able to handle that complexity, we need to be able to share code. And so this is really, it's really exciting to see all the different people coming to help out with the software development. They come from all over the landscape. And so we wanted to spend a day to try to understand it. I like understanding this environment and try to study it. And so I wanted to share, okay, so I look at this as some of the statistics around this. This is coming from, we have an open source data analytics company that we work with called Bitergia, and they mine our GitHub webpage. What I love about OHDSI is that everything we do is out in public. And so all of our GitHub, every time anyone submits an issue or submits code, everything is tracked on the GitHub system. And so we get a lot of great statistics around the operations and flow of different projects and how they're growing as a project. And so for me, the software that supports the OMOP CDM, and we have actually a lot of software that's outside of the OMOP and OHDSI organization. So right now, I'm only able to track all the stuff within inside the OHDSI organization, but there's a ton. There's Darwin. There's just a slew of projects out there that are really helpful and are not inside the organization, but the ones that are protected within our licensing. They are, and we're able to really try to understand the projects and support them well as a community. So I encourage you, if you have a software project, to try to bring it under the OHDSI shell, especially if you want to include it in Broadsea, in our standard distributions that we submit out for our organizations to get value out of the OHDSI CDM. So today we have 284 repositories. They are comprised of all kinds of different functions. We have had over 600 developers over the last 10 years involved in software development across the OHDSI community. We've had over 1,000 different people submitting issues. We've had over 10,000 different issues submitted, and we've had over 50,000 commits. And if you look at that timeline here, you'll see that the number of commits of software continues to grow, although it does look like there's some sort of seasonal variation, which has given me a hypothesis that maybe software developers may hibernate over the winter months. And so I'm gonna have to go investigate that. We've committed over 600,000 files, and we have added over 80 million lines of code. So people come for the OMOP data model, but really, you're really not engaged. You're not really getting the full value of OHDSI until you're using the software that really helps you analyze that data in a standard way. Time at risk analysis, data characterization, helping you developing and validate phenotypes. It's really important to be able to use these analytics tools on top of the data model to really get the full value. And we've also refactored over 45 million lines of code. The code is not static; it is constantly changing. We're adding new features. We're cleaning up bugs. We are adding a whole new projects. And so, if you look at this as an ecosystem, I kind of think of the foundation of the ecosystem is the data model. It is the structural component that helps us answer those 3 basic types of questions. On top of that, we have the semantics of the vocabulary, where we're building, this is the language of evidence, and they are built off of international standard terminologies like SNOMED and LOINC and RxNorm, but they also incorporate hundreds of other local dialects from different clinical terminology as well, and they're fully functional to handle custom vocabulary. So these are really the two. This is the reef of our ecosystem, and on top of this, we have a lot of different communities that are writing software, and so we have a whole group of a school of fish that are focusing on getting data into the OMOP CDM from all sorts of different data sources. These folks are often data analysts and data engineers that like to work on some of our cloud platforms. They like to write in SQL and Python and some of the data transformation languages. We have a large body of fish that are performing analysis on the CDM. These are the folks who are doing statistical analysis, that are performing our data quality assessments. A lot of this is developed in R and also in Python and in different languages. We have actually a whole school of fish that looks like one big fish because they act in a coordinated way. This is our Hades, which is actually 37 different projects that are in tight formation that really lead us by example on how to do code coverage, continuous integration testing around your software. So they really have created the standard for us for how to do good software development and support backwards compatibility and to be able to provide a stable environment. They do biannual releases of their distribution of software. And we have Atlas here, which floats out in the middle, which is actually built on JavaScript and Java, but it is like the turtle. So it supports the whole world, and it has an immense amount of users that really use that for actually doing phenotyping and discovering their data. So Atlas has really provided a foundational tool. So we have different communities within that use the data model and the vocabulary in different ways. But this is, our job is to help nurture this ecosystem and support new developers and support existing developers as they contribute software to our project. This is the most important graph to me. This really looks at the number of developers that are contributing on a regular basis into OHDSI. And what I like here is we've grouped the contributors into core, which are folks who really are maintainers, who are day in, day out, committing, responding to issues, merging code with pull requests. And then we have regular, who are regular developers. And then we have casual developers who are intermittently submitting issues or submitting code. And so what I like is we're seeing a growth in all three of these sectors, but this is what helps me look at the overall health of the ecosystem and makes the assessment that our ecosystem is strong and growing and thriving. And so as we start looking at how we can help nurture more casual contributors to become more regular and more core, this has really been exciting to watch this grow as we were making more of an impact and creating more value out of the OHDSI and the OMOP CDM. Okay, so when we talk about the DevCon, often we always focus on shiny objects, new projects, exciting new technologies that are coming out, which is always a lot of fun. But I think before we do that, we really have to recognize the immense amount of contribution and commitment we have from our community. So I wanted to make sure so this is from last year, over the last 1 year of data, the folks who are really are contributing immense amount of features. So these are issues. These are identifying bugs or recommending new functionality for the software. These are the folks who are really helping us, giving us the requirements we need to make sure our software is solving problems and really creating value for our community. We have the folks who are actually writing the software and committing that software into our system. And really these are, and we're seeing just some people doing a tremendous amount of effort in it. And then we have the folks who are taking those commits and then merging them back into the stream of the main developer branches. And so as we start creating our biannual releases. So these are the folks, so I would love to give them a hearty round of applause. These are the folks who are day in, day out making OHDSI software work for all of us. And so we really have a lot of recognition that they are due for all the effort that they are contributing for our community. So please take a moment to thank them for me if you get a chance to see them, either virtually or in person. And on top of that, the organizations behind them. I found this was really interesting in that the organizations behind them, I looked at this and it's about 1/3 academic, in terms of Erasmus and Tufts and Hopkins and Peking and Northwest and Columbia, and about 2/3 industry, just from just by looking not through the number of commits, but through where the folks are coming from. And it's really, I feel like this is a nice a healthy dynamic where we have contributions coming from across the fields to help us in developing, designing this, creating an open table for software development. Okay, so I wanted to say, so one of the things we want to talk about, and I'd love for you to add in the chat, if you're interested in an open source project, how would you get involved? How would you want to, you don't know how you could help, you don't know, and so how would you get involved in Odyssey if you wanted to do software development? And there's 4 different groups right now that meet on a regular basis within MS Teams that you can join them for free. And so these are Teams groups that you can just sign up for. Martijn Sumi runs the Hades group. The Hades group this is their package coverage, where they have done a great job of delegating and developing maintainer leaders across all their packages, and they've done a fantastic job on code coverage and managing their open issues list. So I feel like this is really a fun group to join, especially if you're interested in developing and enjoy R as a language. We have Anthony Senna and Chris Knoll, who run a monthly Atlas web API tool. This is the main front end for people doing cohort discovery within Atlas and doing data characterization. This is built off of JavaScript, Knockout, and Java. And so this is also a great one to join if you're interested more on the front end and usability of our Odyssey software stack. We have a technology advisory board that's being led by Frank DeFalco, where we're trying to, while we want to always grow our software, we also want to make sure it's going to be running at all of our institutions so people can get value out of the main software packages that we deploy. And so this is the new, this tab was launched last year, and I encourage you to take a look at its wiki, where we've built out its charter, its deliverables, and how we can create a sustainable and stable version of our software so everyone can get full value out of Odyssey. And we also have an open source working group that we'll be talking about, where we get together on a monthly basis, where we have actually a training program for new developers. So one way to join a project is to join one of these Teams groups. Another way is to look in GitHub in the Odyssey organization and find a project that you're interested in. You'll find that a lot of the projects have what we call starter issues, where there might be issues identified that they hoping that some new member might be interested in trying to address. And so taking a look at starter issues is a great way of doing this. Connecting with other software developers within Odyssey is a good way, and building and helping develop your professional career. And we'll talk more about the Kheiron program. But so there are many ways for getting involved as a developer. So today we brought some of the highlights from our daily event. As Craig had mentioned, this is all available on YouTube. I did want to point out we really had we did a deep dive into Darwin, and today we only have 5 minutes for it, and we really spent the afternoon. We had a great afternoon lecture, a discussion on how to get into Graph. And how to do advanced content management that we don't have time to present here today. So I really hope you get a chance to take a look at some of the videos we've created and see if that's a project that you're interested in being involved with. Okay, and so with that, we'll get into some of the highlights. One of the exciting things we've seen this year was really some advances in the ETL management side in terms of growing and how we manage our ETL of getting data into the OMOP. And for that, I'm going to hand it over to Vishnu, who's been working on a new package, a new way to be able to manage the ETL into OMOP. Vishnu, take it away.
Thank you, Paul. Just let me know if you can see the screen. I can't see Teams, so if someone can.
Yeah, it looks great. Looks good.
Thank you very much for inviting me on. I've got 5 minutes, so it will be a blitz through what we've been doing. A big shout out to Quinn Ashcroft, who is on the call today. She's my lead data engineer who's done the bulk of the work. But as always, the boss takes the credit. So there you go. So I'm a consultant surgeon at Lancaster University Hospitals. We are a major teaching hospital and regional trauma center in the northwest of England. We are in a system of 5 big regional centers, serving a population of approximately 1.8 million people. Today, I'm going to speak about our data landscape just at Lancaster Teaching Hospitals, our data engineering journey, and very briefly, I have one slide about where we have deployed our OHDSI analytics infrastructure. We have had an EPR for about 15 years, but we don't have a single EPR that manages all of our services. So we have a variety of bespoke clinical systems that manage endoscopy, for instance, radiology, our cancer registry, our cancer data sits in a different system. Operating theaters use a different clinical application. All of this data sits in disparate databases. Our EPR data sits in Oracle. Some of our systems are on SQL Server, and some of our our laboratory system uses Sybase, which in fact is in German. The tables and columns are named in German. We initially, when we started this journey, it's very similar to a lot of other centers that have started this journey as to why you go into OMOP. So our reasons were very similar. We started off looking at a rabbit in a hat. It looked pretty simple, straightforward. Can we do this? How difficult can it be to take the patient table and map it into the person table in OMOP? And the next screenshot I'm going to show you is what our ETL lineage looks like now. So when you try and do this, mapping data from multiple data sources into a single OMOP CDM, it becomes really, really complex, really fast. So we wanted a tool that will manage this. And we discovered DBT. I'll drop some links in the chat. I know there are others on the call who are also using DBT. DBT stands for Data Build Tool. There's an open source version of it, which is what we used. It's called DBT Core. There's also an enterprise edition, which adds additional cloud features to it. What does DBT provide you? DBT provides a way of doing your ETL that has built-in data lineage, including column level lineage. It's self-documenting. It allows you to generate metadata on the fly. You can target diverse source on-target architectures. For instance, our on-prem DBT ETL works on SQL Server. We have a separate piece of work that happens within Databricks. More importantly, it's allowed my team to work to collaborate. So we are able to work on different parts of the ETL simultaneously, and we're pushing code. We're creating pull requests, and we're all able to work on the same data warehouse in our own schemas. So it has been truly accelerated development for us. Our first commit, if I recall correctly, was in February 2023, and we stood up our first instance of OMOP in July or August that year. I won't bore you with the details. We've structured our. I'll drop a link to our entire documentation in the chat for people to browse through. We have 4 functional layers, as we call them. The layers are based on the different operations that happen at each layer, typical for any data warehousing operation. All of our vocabulary we used Usagi to generate our vocabularies. The outputs of Usagi, Usagi, if you've used, will generate CSV files. So the outputs are then incorporated into our DBT project as seed files, and they become part of the lineage. The advantage is that there isn't a separate process to manage the vocabulary. It's part of the ETL process, A. And B, when your mapping changes, when you use Usagi to update a mapping, it's all under version control. Let's see if I can skip that. Like I said, data lineage is built in. This is what our person table looks like. It shows from the left to the right, the nodes in orange are our source tables. So the person table is created from multiple source tables, and then it goes through staging. And then the pink bit is where vocabulary, the Athena vocabulary gets added in to materialize the final person table. The other thing we've been able to do with DBT is that we've been able to achieve incremental refresh. So our 2 biggest tables are the measurement and observation table, and they refresh. Our entire OMOP instance refreshes every morning. It takes about an hour and a half to do, but our OMOP data is current as of the previous midnight. That's expanded the use of OMOP for us, just from research all the way to direct care intelligence and population health management. We currently have 1.8 million patients mapped into it, with over 400 million measurements, several million procedures and drugs. We are currently validating our OMOP instance through an SME, and we'll be publishing it into the event catalog hopefully next month. What are we working on now? So we're treating the current instance of OMOP as the bronze layer. We're building what's called the OMOP medallion architecture, and this is what we would like to collaborate with work with the community on. If you've got OMOP mapped, if you've got your data mapped into OMOP already, and treat that as the bronze layer, the enrichment after that, we can do that as a community. And this is where DBT or a newer tool that we're exploring called SQL Mesh may come in handy. We could work together as a community on OMOP to build these silver and gold layers. We presented our work at the OHDSI Global Symposium. Thank you for the team for putting a poster up. It's right there. That's Quinn. She's on the call today. She's very shy. You can see the top of her head there. One slide on our architecture. I did say my presentation was titled, the hard way is the easy way. What did we mean by that? Doing it by DBT had a learning curve. It wasn't particularly steep. It's a shallow learning curve, but we did it on our own. The data OMOP transformation was done in-house. The advantage of this is that we understand our lineage really, really well. So bringing in additional data sources is not trivial. We are going on to now start mapping additional data sources from other hospitals, and we're hoping to have a single OMOP instance for 5 big organizations within the region, and maybe next year or the year after that, primary care as well. Our OHDSI stack is hosted on Kubernetes. There are a few things that we continue to work on, especially with the integration of the OHDSI stack with Databricks, and we're hoping to solve that in the next month or two. That's the tech stack. This has been a part of a bigger piece around digital workforce upskilling and our research strategy. We've been able to host multiple projects. We have a PhD in data engineering who started in January. That's Quinn. We've got a second PhD starting later this year. We've got a third PhD student starting, working specifically on large language models, on training large language models on the OMOP schema. That's the team. We're particularly proud to be part of a wider community, especially we are a founding member of the UK OHDSI chapter. I'll drop some links in the chat. And Paul, thank you once again for inviting me for this.
Yeah, Vishnu, thank you so much. It's really exciting to see this new package and how it can help create data lineage and help us really create standardized transformation logic into OMOP. Our next speaker is Roger Carlson. If you have an Epic instance and have converted to OMOP, you most likely have Roger to thank for that, as he developed the main ETL from Epic to OMOP that's contributed on the Galaxy web. And so, Roger, do you want to present what you're up to nowadays?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. Let me share my screen here. Make sure I've got the right one. Okay. So my name is Roger Carlson. I work at Corewell Health, which is a large healthcare system servicing southern lower Michigan. What I'm going to talk about today is an update to a board we presented at the OHDSI 2022 symposium. So our original OMOP instance was special purpose built for a network study called All of Us research program. It was funded by the NIH, still is, of the U.S. here, and it's a fairly large network study. We started out, well, currently we have enrolled about 13,400 patients, and of course, we didn't start out with that many years ago, but because, as Paul said, we have pulling it from Epic Clarity, and that was in SQL Server. We built our OMOP instance in SQL Server using SSIS. But we also used a hodgepodge of other tools, legacy tools. We used SQL Server Management Studio, SQL Server Integration Services, Visual Studio RedCap, some Oracle developer stuff, RStudio, Tortoise, SVN, and even some Microsoft Access applications. As I said, a real hodgepodge. In the end of the year 2020, Corewell was starting to evaluate the use of cloud computing, and they decided on Snowflake. And because this OMOP project was complex, but relatively shallow in terms of only, 10,000 patients, we were seen as a good proof of concept for can we convert this and use Snowflake? And so we started doing that. So Snowflake, we're running Snowflake in the AWS cloud, but it can also run in Azure and Google Cloud, but we're using AWS. We investigated a number of tools to as a data orchestrator, including SSIS and Alteryx or however it's pronounced. But we finally decided on dbt as an orchestrator tool. All of the reasons that Vishnu gave apply to us. He gives a perfect introduction for this particular talk, so I don't have to describe anything about dbt. But then we're mostly open source tools. So in addition to Snowflake and dbt, we're using GitHub, still using Redcat, VS Code to Beaver, and RStudio. So modern tools, all open source and easy to get at. So how long did it take us? Well, the timeline, we started roughly April of 2021. And it took us about 13 months total to go into full production in July of 2022. That was two of us working on it, and so that was roughly about 21 person months. We broke it into 4 different phases. Our phase 1. We just started by converting our SQL Server database to a cloud-based structure, Snowflake. Now, it obviously didn't take us 8 months to convert one database from SQL Server to Snowflake, but we had to build the infrastructure. We had to get our clarity tables into Snowflake in order for that, to work. And we were working with IS to build all around that. We also had an OMOP update, version update from 5.2 to 5.3.1 that was relatively minor. Anyway, that first phase took about 8 months. Phase 2, we converted our SSIS project to work against that Snowflake database. So we would be able to run our legacy process and then run the SSIS against Snowflake and compare the two, see if any, just the conversion to Snowflake had caused any errors, and it hadn't. That took us about 3 months, and it was kind of overlapping phase 1 some. Then phase 3 was we converted our SSIS process to dbt, and this went really, really smoothly. Our SSIS process was just executing SQL tasks in a particular order, and that's what dbt does. And so we were able to take those SQL tasks, SQL statements, and put them very easily into dbt. So this took us about 4 or 5 months. So like I said, roughly in July of 2022, we were able to do our full production of the All of Us extract. We and that was only phase 3. We do have a phase. We had a phase 4 that I'll get to in a second. At any rate, running SSIS with SQL Server took about 1 hour and 50 minutes, and that was not everything. We had to do some manual things. As you can see in the workflow, we had to download our patient list from Redcap. We had to do some custom testing, some curation reporting, and then manually transfer our data to the Google Cloud for all of us. When we converted it to dbt and Snowflake, that 1 hour and 50 minutes went down to 5 minutes, and that was huge. but that we still hadn't gotten our full integration. So that was phase 4. We can now automatically pull new vocabularies, pull our OMOP patient lists, process the data, and upload the CSVs to all of us. And currently, that's we have 13,000 patients. That takes roughly 20 minutes. But this is stem to stern. Everything is automated. And so we completed that, and that was fine. That was for all of us. I'm trying to think when, but it was about a year ago. They wanted us to take our All of Us instance and scale it up to not run just against 13,000 patients, but to run against our entire patient population. In other words, have a full working OMOP instance with a with a Broadsea, with the whole OMOP stack, and that's what we have been working on since. And so we have scaled it up a couple of times. If we run 100,000 patients through this process, it takes about 28 minutes. And to run 1 million patients through this process takes about 40 minutes. So if you're talking, for an order of magnitude, every order of magnitude takes another 10 minutes. Now, I don't know if 10 million would run in 50 minutes. I haven't tested that. We may get there at some point, but still, we can run 1 million patients in 40 minutes. That's without incremental. We are experimenting with the incremental loads in DBT. Snowflake also has a feature called dynamic tables, which kind of increment automatically behind the scenes. So we're also looking at that. So these times may come down even further. We're still looking at that. So that has been our journey moving to the cloud. And if you've got any questions, the whole team is willing to talk to you. You can email me, roger.carlson@corewellhealth.com. I've also got some links here to the various things. So that's it for me. And thanks, Paul. Back to you.
Thanks, Roger. Lisa, if you've got a question, put it in chat and I'll try to address it. So our next speaker is going to be Lee Evans, and there's a question in the chat talking about how do we package our software and how do we maintain the software like Atlas in the form of our technology stack upgrades. And one way we've been doing it has been through Docker containers that we're using for Broadsea. Lee?
Hi, Paul. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sounds great.
Great. You can see the slides. That's good. Well, hi, everyone. I just wanted to talk about an update to Broadsea, but maybe I should start off by saying what it is. So as Paul said, it's a set of Docker containers, which is a nice way of packaging up applications, making them work across different platforms, and easy to upgrade. So we've had, Broadsea's been out for quite a few years now, and we always had Atlas, Web API, and Hades. So RStudio running the Hades packages. And I like to say it's kind of the fastest way to get started. So if you just want to try out the core Odyssey tools, you can use Broadsea with one command to bring up the Docker containers, and you can have access to a local simulated database with just a few patients in it. And you have access to Atlas and RStudio, and you can really start to try things out. Now, there is a path to go from the sort of demo training version to using Broadsea in production. As you heard, it is used in production, but it's it involves transferring over from using the demo database over to your actual CDM database. So I'm not going to talk about that today. I just want to talk about an update to Broadsea. So we've added 2 new applications to it, and Ajit Longley, because of Ajit's work in the previous releases of Broadsea, it actually became quite easy to add new additional applications. So I think going forward, we're also interested in hearing from people as to what new applications they'd like to include. but we want to make sure that we don't have 1,001 applications in Broadsea. So we want applications that are going to be generally useful for everybody. And if you want to send us ideas for that, we have a GitHub. So it's Odyssey Broadsea GitHub, and you can create issues there if you want to. If you have questions on Broadsea or issues to raise or suggestions, please contribute there. And of course, if you want to help us as well, that would be great too. So what do we do with Broadsea 3.5? So we added 2 new applications. So one is pgadmin 4, and that is a web-based SQL client, and it's specifically for Postgres. And you might wonder why we added that. The reason is 2 reasons, really. One is that if you happen to use Postgres as your OMOP CDM, it's a nice tool to be able to use against that. But more importantly, Odyssey only supports Postgres as the application database for Atlas. And so this is now a nice friendly tool to be able to work with that Odyssey application database to add new database users, etc., and just to see how it's laid out. And I have a screenshot a little bit later. So that was one thing. So this new Postgres database SQL client. And then the other thing we added, and this is down to Ajit, he added a Jupyter notebook. So this isn't Jupyter Hub. It's not meant to be multi-user. Or actually, the pgadmin one is multi-user. But the Jupyter Hub one is just an IDE, web-based notebook development environment. And you can use that with Python and Julia. So this, I think, is really a new capability within Odyssey. So if you're a Python developer or Julia developer, I think it's going to be really nice that you can bring up those IDEs and just browse, use the browser to get to them very quickly and easily. Okay, so in general, you do Docker Compose up, and you can bring up all of the Broadsea default applications. So it's one command to do that, and it's all running locally. If you're running on your laptop, you can run them there. If you're running on the server, you can run them there. We didn't include these as default applications, so you do have to specify that you want them, and that's just because not everybody's going to need them. So it's like Docker Compose, there's a profile, pgadmin 4 you mentioned, and there's one for Jupyter Notebook, and that will bring them up. Okay, so what do you get when you start up pgadmin 4 and you browse to that? If you're running locally, you browse to that URL, and you'll see this tool is actually really nice. So you get to see the system statistics. You can look at the users. All the things that you want to do with a database are all available there. You can look on the left-hand side to see what tables, what schemas are out there. So this one is connected to this little tiny Broadsea Atlas database that we have in the container. And so, it's showing you there's a demo CDM there on the left. And yeah, you can try out SQL as a SQL client. It's just so much better than the old way of doing it, where you'd have maybe a command line SQL client where you have to remember all those arcane commands to work with it. And then the other piece is Jupyter Notebook. So I think most people probably on the call have used notebooks at this point. So we have a couple of kernels in there. So we've got Python 3, we've got Julia. R is in there, but I don't recommend that you use this IDE to work with R. There's no reason why you couldn't. You could install Hades and do that, but I think in general, I would still recommend to use the RStudio Hades implementation that we have in Broadsea. It's just more mature. We don't have Hades installed within this Jupyter container, so that would all be something that you'd have to do yourself. I just want to go back for a second because I don't think I called it out, but when you go into this pgadmin 4 interface, it won't have a server defined for you, so you'll have to go in and define it yourself. And it's just a standard kind of database connection to a Postgres database. It will, however, if you stop the container and you bring it back up, it will remember that connection, so you only have to do it one time, which is nice. Okay, so I just wanted to give a little example of how you could use the Jupyter IDE that we have. And this is just installing, a typical Python package to access the database. And then I've got this connection string. I'm not exposing any password here because this is all just a little Atlas demo database that's already out there on the internet. But this is the connection information that you would use to set up that connection back in pgadmin. And so, this is Python. We're connecting to the database. and we're just going to do a cursor object select just from that CDM person and print them out. And actually on the call, on the when we did DevCon, I just walked through that process and I showed executing each of these cells. All right, so that's all good news. The best news is it's all available now. So if you want to install this, try it out yourself. Even if you just want to get a flavor for what the Odyssey tools look like and how to use them, you've now got all the pieces within Broadsea. There's this little simulated database. You've got the tools, and it's just a case of download the release, install it, do Docker Compose up, specify the right profiles, and you're good to go.
Excellent. Thank you, Lee. So the Odyssey Technology Advisory Board is basically a group of maintainers of a lot of our software where we get together and talk about how our software needs to work together. And it's currently being led by Frank. Frank, do you want to present?
Sure, Paul, thanks. And I know we're a little short on time, so I'll keep this very brief. So as Paul said, the Technical Advisory Board is a group focused on guiding and supporting the technical development of our Odyssey open source projects. And it's made up of members from the community across a variety of working groups, as well as some external partners who are vendors who work within the community or are technology suppliers for different database platforms or other technologies that we're using for Elastic Compute. And our focus is to try and ensure the stability, the security, supportability, and sustainability of our Odyssey open source packages. So an open call for people who would like to participate or just join and hear the conversations during our technical advisory board meetings. We meet the first Friday of every month from 10:30 a.m. Eastern to 11:30 a.m. Eastern. You can find more information, the conversations, the agendas, and the logs and recordings for our meetings under the Open Source Working Group Teams channel within the Odyssey Teams environment. So I'll wrap that up there. And again, welcome to have anyone join who'd like to participate with the Technical Advisory Board.
Excellent. Thank you, Frank. And lastly, we wanted to talk about how you can get involved. And one of the ways we've been doing that is we've been providing a cohort training program for developers to be involved with Odyssey. And Katy Sadowski is one of our leaders that helps us run that Kheiron training program. Katy?
Great. Can you all see my slides?
Yep.
Wonderful. So yes, my name is Katy Sadowski. I'm on the real world evidence team at Boehringer Ingelheim, and I'm also a former Kheiron cohort member and a current Kheiron mentor. And today I'm going to share an update on our 2024 program. So what is the Kheiron cohort? The cohort is a mentorship program designed to onboard new contributors into Odyssey and empower them to become active contributors and maintainers. So the Kheiron cohort is run out of the Odyssey open source community work group, and it's all about getting more developers involved in our open source software ecosystem. Open source software sits at the heart of the Odyssey mission, vision, and values. All Odyssey software is completely free, and its source code is not only open for users to see, but also for developers to contribute to. However, it can be daunting to get started as a contributor, especially for folks who are newer to the community. In Odyssey, we've got high standards for code quality and a rigorous development process, and there's just tons of interconnected pieces of software to figure out. So the Kheiron program was designed to help folks navigate all of this and ramp up as members of the Odyssey open source community. 2024 is going to be the third year of the program, which runs from September through April. And each cohort member is paired with a mentor who's going to guide them through the onboarding process and help them get involved in an open source project in Odyssey. There's also monthly training sessions on topics like Git and unit testing, setting up the Odyssey development environment, and deep dives on different Odyssey software tools. Brief pause for a fun fact. What is a Kheiron? A Kheiron is actually a specific centaur who was the mentor to Achilles and many other Greek gods. So you can sense the mentorship theme here. And really the highlight of this program is the opportunity for new folks to pair with a mentor. And something really special that we do is each year, some former Kheiron members are asked to come back as mentors for the next batch. And that was the case for me last year. And now we have 3 new mentors joining us from the 2023 cohort. That's Hayden, John, and Kyle. And we're super excited to have them involved. I think this is great both for the mentees who get the chance to learn from someone who's just navigated that same onboarding process, but also for the mentors who get a really great leadership opportunity. And best of all, for the community, I think doing this creates a really awesome web of collaboration and cross-pollination across different projects. So who should apply to the Kheiron cohort? Basically, you got to be familiar with OMOP and OHDSI. This program is not OMOP 101, and you should be proficient in software development. The program is also not a coding bootcamp. Most importantly, though, you need to be able to commit enough time to the program. We ask that cohort members devote about 4 hours each week to Kheiron work and activities. Most of the work for the program is going to be self-paced, so you will be able to fit this in around your schedule, though it's just really important that you're able to carve out this time in advance so you can get onboarded and then actually start contributing code throughout the year. I would make one recommendation: discuss this with your manager at work. It's really important you got their approval to take this time out from your week. You can actually put, blocks on your calendar, and it's a cool thing to put in your, performance or career goals. So that's it for me. If you're interested in applying, we've got a Google form, which is linked on the slide, and I can drop in the chat afterwards. We want you to submit this by June 1st, so we have time to review all the applications, and feel free to reach out to me or Paul or Adam if you've got any questions. Thanks.
Katie, thank you. Yeah, this is a great way for career development, and the program will begin in September and runs through April. All right, Craig, we made our time allotment. Handing it back to you. Or any other questions we can answer about our open source developers conference. Is there any questions that we didn't get to in the chat?
Certainly, we have a couple minutes here. I know there were some questions in the chat. It's hard to follow whether they were all answered or not. So if anybody has a question they want to raise their hand right now, please do so.
We did have a question that I thought, oh, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so just quickly, the Kheiron program, you mentioned there that you wanted people on there with experience of OMOP and so forth. Now my area of expertise is definitely not in OMOP. My area of expertise is on things like infrastructure and infrastructure as code, Kubernetes, all that kind of stuff. So I've been contributing quite a lot back to the into the Broadsea implementations and so forth in there. And I'm just wondering, have you got any sort of views on a similar program for people who want to contribute on that kind of level? Because I am not an analyst, and I don't really want to be a data analyst, and I've learned quite a few skills already. I don't really want to necessarily branch off into becoming an OMOP expert as well.
I think the two things that we focus on in the Kheiron program is networking and mentoring. I think what's interesting is that you can learn the OMOP CDM really quickly through the Eden Academy. There's self-paced courses that are a few hours long. It's just an SQL relational database with a great vocabulary management system around it. So it's useful to learn the language of clinical evidence. And so even if you're purely technical, it's actually really useful to go through a couple of the Eden courses. They're self-paced and really straightforward to go through. The other thing we find is, of course, if you don't know programming, that's also that's one of the best things to learn on the internet. There's so many resources for learning how to program in R and Python, whether it's Khan Academy, it's LinkedIn Learning, it's DataCamp, Coursera, edX, you name it. There's fantastic resources for learning how to program, but then we want to tell you how we program the OHDSI way. So we're going to teach you how to set up your software development environment, how to load, how to be able to set up your IDE, how to be able to build Hades, how to be able to build the web API and Atlas. And so really it's going to be how do we get you involved in the software development process. If you're already in, that's fantastic. We certainly want to encourage you to continue to do that with Broadsea. I think that's wonderful also. But this program is meant for folks who want to interact with other software developers, get some mentoring, and kind of understand OHDSI from a big picture, and then can see the relative value of the piece that they're working on.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
I would also add that the reason we kind of encourage folks to be already familiar with OMOP and OHDSI before applying is it's just a lot to learn all of OMOP and also onboard to the software. So maybe if you don't feel ready yet with your OMOP knowledge, we do this every year. So take the year to do the Eden trainings, read the Book of Odyssey, and then next year you'll have that foundation ready.
Yeah, also it'd be great to, you can make some real contribution with Kubernetes. We're really excited about standardizing our software and doing it through and having standard distributions that we can really scale this out in common configuration. So that's really exciting. And there was also a good discussion on security, which I don't know if we were already out of time, but that was also a really important point to talk about, is how do we do security scanning of our software? We work with our cloud vendors. We have Odyssey on Azure, Odyssey on AWS, and Odyssey on GCP. But this is something that maybe we can take up at a later point to talk about how we do security review of our software to help you get through your security IT audit at your local institution.